Hi, Lone Star. Say hi to Lone Star.
Hello, Lone Star. I'm here.
Be right with you. I'm looking at one last thing. Hey, Heather. Be right with you. Okay. How's it going? We're going to pick up. What's it saying?
Yeah,
I didn't touch nothing.
no, that's just the computer telling you that it can make things better.
Oh, okay. We are going to discuss more of the first. Oh, I need to take this off. I forgot I had 2 pairs of glasses on. We're going to give it a minute or two, and then we are going to discuss more of the First Amendment. There are actually 5 rights that are covered in the First Amendment.
Yeah, good luck, Lone Star. He said bifocals.
Oh, yeah. I know, right? I should just get them. I should just get them, but it's just easier to do this. And cheaper. Okay. Amendment 1. Well, the other day I had a little impromptu rant about freedom of speech. And you're welcome to go back and look at that. What video was that? Pull that up and post that.
Okay. Any proceeding on it?
So, reading the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So in there are actually, hi Mary, there are actually 5 rights. It's freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom to peaceably assemble, and freedom to redress.
Petition the government for redress.
Petition the government for grievances. Yes.
Yeah, he said, "Nah." Lone Star said, "Nah, that's pretty genius about the glasses." Mary loves the new short haircut.
Oh, thank you, Mary. So, like I said, we had a little impromptu discussion on the First Amendment the other night.
Specifically about freedom of speech.
Specifically about freedom of speech, yeah. I invite you to go back and look at it. Make any comments that you have. Be happy to discuss that part again with you at any time. But today, we were going to do... Don't look at me, well, I told you.
There's 5 parts, and we only did one of them so far.
We were going to do freedom of the press.
Yes, freedom of the press.
And why it's necessary. Even though I believe that they're in the yellow journalism part of time again. But that's neither here nor there. It's necessary for us to have a free press. The reason this is concerning to me right now is because you hear so many different factions. Some say that the press... Okay. I have a headache already and we haven't started. To you people out there who think that the press should be regulated and that maybe possibly even licensed by the government. Have you lost your ever-loving minds? If a press is not free to discuss with people topics that are going to be uncomfortable to the government, then we have no freedoms. Do we have to agree with said press? Not likely. If you think the press needs to be under the thumb of the government, ask Venezuela how that's working out for them. Ask the citizens of Iran how that's working out for them. North Korea, China,
Russia.
Shall we go on?
There's any number of candidates around the world.
Get over here.
I can't get any closer.
You can get closer. You can pretend like you like me.
I do like you. There's no pretend.
Okay.
But you got the computer aimed that way, and I'm on this way.
I'm sorry, folks. This might be a little bit... There you go. Here he is. Okay.
The whole idea of freedom of the press is that you be able to speak your mind and say whatever you wish. The press has a duty under our system of government to make sure that everybody's on the up and up.
Yes.
The whole idea of a free press is to be an honest broker.
To ask the uncomfortable questions of the government. To make sure that everything has the light of day on it.
Well, if you're going to regulate the press, first of all, if I have to have government permission to voice an opinion or to write an article about things that I see that need to be fixed or corrected or however the government's working, gee, if I'm going to say bad things about the government and they've got to give me permission to say it, what's the chances they're going to? The whole foundation of the First Amendment freedom of the press is that it's pretty heavily biased towards, it doesn't matter what the press is going to say, you leave them alone and let them say it. If you don't like it, you make a counter argument. You counter their facts with your own facts or interpretations thereof. But they get to say what they want. The Pentagon Papers is a very specific example. They wanted to publish documents that showed the government was doing things that were not what they were telling the people. The government argued that they couldn't do that because it would harm national security.
Well, what harms national security more is the government doing things behind closed doors that the people are unaware of.
So, freedom of the press is very broad-ranging, and the whole idea of registering the press and only certain people get to make comments on things is contrary to the whole concept of freedom of the press.
And some people may argue, well, that sounds good. Look at how the press is out of control now. Okay, so the press is out of control now. What about in 2 or 4 years when somebody else may be in office? Or the same person's in office? Are you going to feel the same way at that point? Because here's the thing. Whether your guy or woman or whoever is in office, somebody's not going to like what's being said against them, and that's too darn bad. Because the press has an obligation. Now, do I think the press is living up to their obligation? Absolutely not. I think that they all need to have their degrees taken away from them, and I think 4th and 5th graders can do a much better job than what the press is doing. The press is actually doing a disservice to the country right now. I have listened to 6 major news feeds over the last week. And whether they are pro or anti this government, they are
this administration.
every last one of them is doing a disservice to the American people.
Hi, Kitty.
Hi, Kitty. Your job is not to interpret, not to argue for or against a specific administration. The press's job is solely to report to the people without prejudice, without opinion. You want to give your opinion? Be an op-ed. Write an op-ed. Your job is to report what the government is doing.
Well, what's happening in the country or on the planet? Who, what, when, where, why, and how.
Sometimes how.
That's what the press should be doing. Remember those standards? Edward R. Murrow reported on things. Walter Cronkite reported on things. They were trusted because they said what the news was. They told the story. The whole story, good, bad, ugly, whatever. The facts were what the facts were. They didn't pick and choose parts of the story to make their own agenda or to put it in a light that they preferred.
But the reason that this is so important right now is because you do have government officials saying that maybe the press should be licensed. You do have people saying maybe the press should be licensed. At no point, whether the press is doing their job or not, should the press ever be licensed by the government. Once the press is licensed by the government, you absolutely lose freedom because you will never be able to report on corruption. You will never be able to report on a deep state. You will never be able to report on anything.
Well, if your livelihood as a journalist, your income depends on you being a credentialed press member, and your press credentials and ability to do your job depend on the government's pleasure and goodwill towards what you're saying, how likely are you to say, hey,
it's not so bad?
Well, you're not going to report on the fast and furious running guns across into Mexico that the ATF did. You're not going to report on the administration secretary using public funds to remodel his office and go buy fancy sheets and mattresses on the public dime. All administrations have scandals. They come to light and things get fixed because it gets reported.
Because of sunshine.
Sunshine is the best disinfectant. If you can't report the story for fear of somebody pulling your press pass and you don't get to have a job anymore, there are very few people who are strong enough to throw their career away to make a point. That's a sad statement because it used to be the norm. Folks in the press had the integrity. But, go ahead.
The members of the press that I hold in the highest esteem are the members of the press that will not give up their sources, will report the story, and willing to go to jail for it. Which they shouldn't go to jail because
the First Amendment
says freedom of the press.
But Tanya says loves your hair.
Oh, thank you, Tanya.
The whole reason for the freedom of the press in the First Amendment
war, when the press was regulated by King George 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles away.
3,000 is a good number.
3,000? 3,000 miles away. Okay? People were being locked up and punished for writing what was happening. Just go back and read Benjamin Franklin. Silence Do Good?
Silence Do Good are some of the letters.
The Silence Do Good letters.
Well, Poor Richard's Almanac.
Poor Richard's Almanac. Benjamin Franklin did a lot for bringing sunshine out on what was happening.
The whole idea of a free press allows them to make reportage that covers unpleasant things that the government might not like. They're supposed to be the ones who look at the honest broker of information. Keep saying that.
We're buffering. Are we still buffering?
No, not right now.
Okay, because I'm showing a red line on there. Now it's orange. Can somebody tell me if we're still good? Can you hear us? Can you see us?
Tommy, can you see me? Shh. Oh, come on. Seems better now, she said.
Okay, thank you.
Press ahead.
Okay. So as much as we may not like what the press is doing, and I'm talking about all the press, because everybody's got to spin on something nowadays, and it is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know. A survey was taken a few years ago, and students, I think it was from Columbia in New York, were asked, Columbia University, were asked as journalism majors, what they expected to be able to do with their degree. The majority of them said, change the world. Not your job. Your job is to report on the world. And other people's jobs are to change the world.
Well, if you properly illustrate what's going on that needs change.
But you don't facilitate it.
You don't get to decide what that change would be. You get to tell the story. And things get changed that need to be changed.
I mean, there's a number of things that are happening. Look at South Africa. That nobody is hearing what's happening in South Africa.
Yeah, that's...
Look at China. We're not even hearing the full story on China.
You don't have to go across the world. All you have to do is look to the southwest. Fires in California. They have 2 people that they've said committed arson. Well,
one they're willing to tell you who it is. The other they're not. Look at New Mexico. What happened last week in New Mexico? Do I think their choices are right? No. Do I think they have the right to be idiots of themselves? Make idiots of themselves? Under the Constitution, yes, I do. Because once we say you have to talk about this, not that, we are no longer a free press. We are no longer a free people.
Yeah, and you can't be a little bit free. You can't have a little bit of freedom of speech. It doesn't work that way. You're either free to speak your mind and say what needs to be said, or you're not free.
And that goes hand in hand with freedom of the press. If the press is not free to speak about what's going on, then you're not a free people. Anybody have any questions? Anything they want to say?
Yeah, we're happy to have comments. Chime in anytime. The idea of licensing the press and immediately brings up the question of who gets to decide what qualifies as a media outlet, what qualifies you as a reporter. Can I not take my phone and go down and record the council meeting in the town nearby and
then come to YouTube and make a commentary about it?
Upload it to YouTube and say, hey, look, here's what's going on. We recently had some major road construction projects, and the transition from the old road to the new road was a total snarl up. And people posted videos about how bad the traffic was. Are they allowed to do that? Do they have press credentials?
And that's another thing. If the government is allowed to say who the press are, or what organizations are allowed to speak on behalf of the press, what does that do to people like us?
Yeah, how long will you be able to make videos? Is it okay to talk about raising chickens and collecting eggs, but I can't talk about, the fact that they're going to put a roundabout in instead of everybody else is taking them out and they're going to put one in near here?
or getting on here and talking about South Africa or China, North Korea, Venezuela. You're not hearing this in the press either. And we're gone more on the press than we are about the freedom of the press. Pardon me. But look at what happened in Venezuela. Canadian company sued in the United States.
Yeah, there's a Canadian company had mining contracts in Venezuela, and because of all of the unrest there, they weren't allowed to protect themselves. They weren't allowed to carry out their contract. They sued the government of Venezuela, and the primary assets in this country of the government of Venezuela, because they won their case, is Citgo Gas Corporation, gas and oil. Well, there's a sealed judgment. They haven't released it yet because they're waiting for, I don't know what, all the other cases to be heard or whatever's going on. But they're going to be awarded damages out of
funds that are in the
United States.
Which is going to make Venezuela even worse.
Not anywhere on the news.
No, but that I would be willing to bet the people of Venezuela, because their press is not free, is not going to be able to tell them that because of this court case with the Canadian company in the United States, that their lives are actually going to get worse, as if you would ever think it could.
Well, the inflation's only 1,000,000% a year. And seriously, that's not hyperbole, not me grabbing a big number. They estimate the inflation in Venezuela is going to be 1,000,000% annually.
So this is the reason we talk about these stories, is because this is the reason why the press has to be free. Why the press has to have the access to the federal government, to local governments, to state governments, to any government or organization that will impact the citizenry.
They have to be able to print the news as it is, and having here's the thing. With every right comes responsibility. They have the right to print their stories. They have the responsibility to be honest brokers of information. They're supposed to have the integrity, journalistic integrity, to tell the story straight up. The Joe Friday routine, all the facts, just the facts. Well, you can't pick and choose the facts that shade the story the way you want it if you're being an honest broker of news. You have to tell the whole story. You can't hide parts of it that don't fit your agenda.
Or might embarrass somebody that you
are in favor of. That's right. And I don't care. Everybody looks at this as they like. It's all a matter of whose ox got gored. If your guy's in office and the press is covering up for him, you think it's great. And when somebody who doesn't like your guy says something, you want to get rid of him. You want him shut up. That's not the way it works. Because whether it's in 4 years, 8 years, it doesn't matter. It's going to switch. Somebody else is going to be in charge that you don't like. And you don't want them doing the same thing to your guy when the shoe's on the other foot. The best thing you should have is an honest press with integrity. We don't have that right now. And that's a damn shame.
It is. But even though they're not doing their job, no government agency, federal, state, or local, has the right to impose restrictions on them.
No, the way it works is if news outlet A is not telling the full story, then you don't watch news outlet A anymore. You tell them you're going to B or C or D or however far down the food chain you have to go to get information that's accurate and fully covered. It's a damn shame. One of the places I go to routinely to look for the whole story is to go to
Hi, Heidi.
Is to go to the UK and look at the Guardian or some of their papers there, because they don't like us for the most part. They're going to tell, but they're a lot better at telling the full story over here than they are at home.
Go on. I'm going to read for a second.
They tell the full story about our stuff, and sometimes they want to slant it to make the president look bad or support policies. They do it too. But you get a better picture there. It's a damn shame. I have to go to an English newspaper in England to get a story about something that happened, the next state over, to get the true story. So it's incumbent upon all of us to let these news outlets know when you find out that they're shading the story, they're not covering the whole story, they're not telling everything there is, call them on it.
Because we never want it to get to the point that the press isn't free to print. Yes, there is crap all over, whether it's in print press, media press,
internet, print, news, the over-the-air, cable, doesn't matter.
They have a job to fulfill. And the government should never step in and try to impose its power over, just like we said, and if you'll click that again, the video that we did on freedom of speech. It's equally important that the press have the freedom to tell us what is happening in our government, in our country, in our towns, our states. It is absolutely imperative that they have the openness to do that. Now, if they're not doing it, the government should never step in. We, the people, should step in and hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah. Kitty says, seems like the government seems to step in everywhere now, no matter what. Well, that's because we let them.
And that's why we're doing this whole series on Tip it this way. Sorry. The Constitution. And why it is important that you know it. You know what? There are times of the day that I look at the press and go, why are you able to be on the air? But I would never want anybody to take them off the air. It goes back to something that we talked about in personal freedom of speech. Why would you want any part of the government to be able to operate in the dark? You can't let them do that. And if it were not for news outlets, let's face it, I don't care how good you think somebody is. People are people, and there's good and bad, and we're seeing that there's a lot of bad going on right now. That's why it's incumbent upon the press to do their job. And when we find out that they're not doing their job, and we do, I don't care how much they try and hide it, they're not good at it. They just need to stop because they're not good at it. When we do find out, it is our responsibility, with our right to speak freedom of speech, to let them know we want them to do their job the right way. Because if they ever lose their right to tell us what's happening, how long do you think it's going to be before our rights are gone?
And the idea of the government picking and choosing who's a journalist and who gets to comment on things is probably the worst idea I've heard from anybody in a long time.
Lone Star, I see what you're saying. You don't listen to mainstream media, you listen to talk radio, and that's great. But even talk radio has its spin. And let me tell you something, I'm not picking on either side, because right now I'm kind of ticked off at all of them. One side doesn't get to be a cheerleader, and the other side doesn't get to be the opposing team trying to rip their heads off. They're supposed to look out for the country. They're supposed to do their job to who, what, when, where, and how.
And you say he doesn't listen to talk radio either.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he turned it on and it almost made him sick.
But that's how they get away with stuff. Because you got rah-rah on one side and you got tone down on the other side.
And the thing, just go back and look, pick a topic of your personal interest. and search for that topic and look for, pick a politician and see what they said about it now and see what they say about it 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Because there are people right now beating the drum on one side of an issue that under a different administration took with equal vehemence and fire the opposite position. I don't care whether you're a D or R or what. I'm an American. I want America to be stronger and taken care of.
And that's why it's incumbent upon us. See,
hello, Freaky Geek. That's all you want.
That's why it's incumbent upon us to never take our rights for granted, because too many have, and too much is moving towards taking them away from us. That, you know, being a citizen, everybody says, is free in this country. You're born here, you're a citizen, you don't have responsibilities. Well, I beg to differ with you. You have a lot of responsibilities. If I hear one more person say, I don't vote because it doesn't matter, we're going to have a problem. A big one. My eye's twitching, and you haven't even said it to me yet.
Yeah, somebody almost got thrown out into the yard the other day for that.
It is important that we've talked about two rights now in the First Amendment. The first one, freedom of speech. It is incumbent upon us to use our voices. The second one, freedom of the press. It is incumbent upon us to make sure that the press does their job. Because if they don't do their job, we don't know what's going on. We can't do our part. And I'm not talking about going out and voting for this candidate or that candidate. I am talking about it is your duty to know what your government is doing so that if it's wrong, you correct the problem.
Okay, Lone Star said, I don't say that. But I've heard, I don't vote because I don't like either of the options. What's your opinion on that?
My opinion on that is I almost said a bad word.
Get your tushy?
Get your tuchus out and find somebody that you trust and believe in and get them to run for office. Then you work that same tuchus off until they get elected. And if you can't find somebody that believes what you do, then you get out there and you sign up and you run for the office and you get your tuchus out there and you convince people to vote for you. There have been many a times I don't like either candidate. But you know what? We got stuck with those candidates, and it wasn't because I didn't try and find somebody better.
Rain said, yes, use our voices, but when one sees firsthand and up close how the presidential votes work, you realize your voice does not count. Rain,
no,
I
that's
disagree.
Not true. That's not true.
In the 1960 election between JFK and Richard Nixon, the margin of error or the margin of separation between the two candidates was such that if you had one more vote for Nixon in each voting precinct in the country, one vote, that would have swayed the election and Nixon would have been president and not Kennedy. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is not the point. The point is one vote per precinct would have made that a different election.
And that gets me something else too. Because people talk about we need to get rid of the Electoral College, that it's outdated, it's not needed. I beg to differ with you. Because the Electoral College is one of the most important parts of our system of elections. And you know that every one of you can be an elector. You have to get involved. You have to find out how the electors are elected in your state. The Electoral College, if it were to be dissolved and popular vote took over, there are 5 states that would determine every presidential election in this country. 5 states. The other 45 states might as well stay home. That's why the Electoral College is so important. I don't know about you, but if you feel like your voice isn't being heard with the system we have now, I guarantee you, unless you lived in one of those 5 states, your voice would never be heard.
They talk about Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. I'm trying to find the map here. I'll post a link to it in a second. If you look at the elections and the difference in population that Hillary won by, three counties, or three in the entire country, Hillary won New York by more, like 4 million votes, and she only won the popular vote by, I don't know, she only won the popular vote by 3 million. I'll get it in a minute.
Yeah, because we're going to put up a link.
3 counties made the difference in the popular vote. So there's another map running around that shows the counties that voted by population density, and
find the map and post the link, because it's very important to okay. Is that by precinct?
That shows by county.
By county. Okay. This is how the country voted in the 2016 election. Okay.
Rain said,
sad and disheartened. But what I saw, exactly.
I was pretty heavily involved in 2012 election, alternate delegate at a county convention. Saw first one what happens. I could go on and on. What happens most people don't see.
Exactly. And but that could change if people would get involved and stay involved. Because you know what? Things are run by those who show up. Okay, you're posting the link?
Yeah, I did.
You posted the link. Okay? Now you'll see that the majority of the country was red. But Mrs. Clinton, whose voters were blue. If it had not been for the Electoral College, she would have won. The point I'm trying to make is, look at all of the country that would have been ignored. At least the Electoral College gave everyone a voice. Let's see. Let me go back to this. Voted in every election from the time I turned 18 till 22. I did vote in the past election. No. Nobody should vote the way people think they should vote. People should vote according to how you feel. What's important to you? Look, I'm going to vote one way most of the time. That's because I believe in an ideal. But that doesn't mean that I have to make you vote my way. If I can't make my case to convince you that you should vote my way, then go vote against me. Cancel my vote out. But everybody should be involved in the process. You know what? I've been to precinct meetings. I've been to county conventions. I've been to district conventions. I've been to state conventions. I've never been to a national convention because they're so expensive. But I have been to all these conventions. And I'm telling you right now, things are run by the people who show up. And if people that show up do not match what you believe, I did this one year. There was something that was coming down that I heard about and I didn't like. So I talked to everybody I knew and begged them, please go to your precinct meetings, because at your precinct meetings is where your county convention delegates are elected and your alternates. I begged everybody I know, please go. This is what's going on. I don't think it's right. You don't think it's right? Good. Go to your precinct meetings and then get elected as a delegate to the county convention. And if you can't be a delegate, be an alternate, and still come even though you're an alternate, because somebody might not show up in your precinct, and then you can be
you'd be promoted to a
a
delegate.
delegate. We were able to stop something that we did not agree with, because I went out and talked to a number of people and said, go to your precinct. I need your vote at the county convention.
Yep. Hello, Teresa Dean. Look.
Hello, Teresa.
Just one real quick thing about the 2016 election. Out of 3,112 counties in the United States, Donald Trump won 2,622 counties. Hillary Clinton won 490 counties.
And she won the popular vote.
So
if you think your voice won't be heard, your voice isn't heard now, just think how much it won't be heard if we get rid of the Electoral College.
When L.A., San Francisco,
New York,
Miami, and New York, predominantly, and those are the places that the vast majority of the population is going to vote from. And they almost predominantly vote the same way. Whether you like that or not,
if
you're not in one of those places, it doesn't matter what you say without the Electoral College. That's another chapter, another video for down the road to get into that in more detail. Your hair looks great.
Oh, thank you, Teresa.
She didn't cut it. The hairdresser down the road did.
Yeah.
Chainsaw accident?
Nope. Nope. I did this intentionally. But back to a free press. A free press is necessary for a free people. Now, does the press abuse their right? Yes. Because people are people, and unfortunately nowadays everybody seems to have an agenda. There was a time in publishing, in newspapers or television, that you couldn't go out unless, if you had a story, every I needed to be dotted, every T needed to be crossed, and then it had to be triple checked.
Mm-hmm.
In this time of instant gratification and gotcha, that seems to have gone by the wayside.
Yeah, it used to be, you go to the editor and say, hey, I think I got this story. And you tell them what you had. So, well, you think you got it? That's great. When you got it, come
back.
See me. Come see me. When you have the story and you can back it up with alternate sources that verify it, when you can demonstrate
multiple sources
that confirm it, we'll run it. The whole idea of, hey, I heard somebody said that they run with now, it's kind of like the old have you stopped beating your wife question. They throw it out there and, oh, well, gee, if they print a retraction or if they say something, well, we've got that. They usually don't even do that anymore. But if they do, it'll be buried in the back of the paper or as a tag in at the end of the thing. Oh, by the way, we're sorry about this. And now in sports. So we have to hold the media who
accountable.
We have given them great power through the Constitution. Because remember, we the people are in charge. We govern ourselves through the mechanisms that we have established. The Constitution sets forth the framework. All of those elected, when somebody says our elected leaders, they're not my leaders, they're my servants. They work for me.
And you. Somewhere along the line, we have lost the idea, and I don't know how, that we pay them to do a job. Because we do. Government does not have its own money. Government has money from all of us. And I don't know, when you sit there and do a job and you're paid from the money that I send in, you're an employee.
So we need to hold accountable our employees in the form of elected officials. We need to hold the media, who we have given power and authority to, and responsibility to do things. We need to make them go do their jobs. If you see a media report that you know they didn't tell the whole story, you need to call, if it's a TV station, call them up.
Amen, Mr. Rain.
If it's a newspaper article, you need to call the editor.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead and read.
We are being fleeced. Political figures have us playing badminton with us voting Democratic or Republican. Realistically, this country is dealing with a colossal two-headed snake. Now, I can't argue that.
Well, more like a hydra.
Yeah, it's got, well, two main heads, but there's other branches, and they all work together.
Yep.
We are under the illusion we have a choice. The problem is, it all starts at our level. We talked about
Tip O'Neill one time said that all politics are local. Never has a truer statement been made. Every last politician comes up from somewhere. From your hometown, the next hometown, half a state over. That makes it local.
Depending on where you live, the congressional district we live in covers like 18 counties because it's a sparsely populated area. But you still get one representative for the same number of people. If you don't like the way your representative votes, find somebody. It's too late for this election cycle, but find somebody for the next time. Now's the time to start getting somebody ready for the next go-around. Find somebody who thinks the way you think they should, who is willing to step out there and take the slings and arrows of this, and start building an organization to put them in office. I don't care if they're running against a sixth-term incumbent or whatever. Find somebody who makes sense, who can articulate a position, and get out there and help them get elected. Put somebody in there that represents what you want, not who's going to do the least damage.
If you want to change stuff, you're going to change it in 2020. And if you want to change it in 2020, you need to start today.
Anyway, First Amendment, free press, hold them accountable to do their jobs.
Yes, because we need the press. They're a double-edged sword, and we need that double-edged sword. We need to hold them accountable so that they actually do their job and tell us what's really happening. And you know what? You might not like what you hear, but dagnabbit, you need to hear it.
Yeah, you can ignore the facts, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring the facts. That's where we're all at. Everybody sits there, the media tells you a bunch of BS, and you say, okay, and you go on about the business.
Or you get mad and you stop listening.
You got to hold them accountable. You got to tell them that they're wrong. You got to tell them to do their job right. Sooner or later, if enough people walk away, enough people stop paying for that until they start doing their job right. If they hear it enough times, money talks and BS walks. If you start holding them accountable and threatening their advertising and all that, they listen. Holding them accountable is one reason why we have the Second Amendment. Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. It's prerequisite to be slimy and have scales to be on the ballot. No, it's not.
Actually, there's somebody that... Stop. Yeah, I was on a ballot one time. I'm not scaly.
Me either.
No, he was on a ballot one time. We lost. I lost by a whole lot less than you did.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the local newspaper called me under the influence. They slammed me pretty well the day before the election. But anyway, we say this. We have gone out there and jumped into the fray and sat up on the dais for the debates and all of that stuff.
Look, there's somebody that I'm working with right now to run for Congress in 2020. I'm not saying do as I say. I am saying follow my example.
Do as we are telling you because that's what we're doing. Or, you can't sit back and complain.
Well, you can, but I'm not going to listen to you.
Well, you're not going to, all you're going to do is continue to complain because there's nothing going to change if you don't do something.
If you don't like the way things are going, you have the ability to change it. Yes, you're one person, but you know what? One person is a drop in the bucket. I got that. But another person is 2 drops in the bucket. And before you know it, there's a ripple in the bucket because a lot of drops got in there.
And here's the thing. In years gone by, if you look at what's going on now, there would have been uproar in the streets. Dare I say, the tar would be heating up and the feathers would be pulled out of the pillows for some of the things that are going on. Not that I encourage violence, but
absolutely, we do not encourage violence.
The outrage to make things change isn't there anymore. The only outrage you see is that's rented by well-funded folks to push an agenda.
On either side.
On either side. You're not seeing us, the common folks, the people who live, breathe, die, work in America, who look around and say, what happened to my country? Well, get your torches and pitchforks and let's go make something happen.
Now,
metaphorically.
Just to do a wrap-up. The government should never be able to stop the press, to license the press, to influence the press. The press is there to shed sunlight on what the government is doing at any level. Like I said, federal, state, or local. The press is necessary. However, having said that, it is incumbent upon each of us to make sure that we hold the press's feet to the fire and they actually do their job. Put up one more time. We did a video.
Oops.
We did a live? Okay, we did a live stream Wednesday night that talked about freedom of speech. We're talking about the press today. We are going to do a multi-part live stream on freedom of religion, which is also one of the 5 rights that are mentioned in the First Amendment. It is absolutely necessary.
The other First Amendment video.
If you do not have your own copy of the Constitution, send me a message. Put the email up there. Old Ways New Times. oldwaysnewtimes@gmail.com. Send me a message. Give me your name and address. I will send you a copy free of charge. Each one of these costs me roughly $1.70 to purchase and mail them. I'm willing to do that so that you have your own copy and you know exactly for yourself. And when somebody says, well, it's in the Constitution, you can look it up and see whether it is or it isn't. The other thing is that do not take other people's words. Books that are written about the Constitution. Look at the bibliography. Look and see what sources. If they haven't looked at a source or listed a source past the 1900s, throw that book away.
Further back than 1900.
Yeah, if they don't list anything further back than the 1900s, throw that book away. And when you want to know, go to the Library of Congress. Every one of you are watching us online. So I know you have access to online. Go to the Library of Congress. Don't take somebody else's words for it. Read what the Founding Fathers said.
There's the transcript of the Constitution from the National Archives.
Here's something that we hear all the time. James Madison was the architect for the Constitution. No, not really. He made about 70 proposals to be in the Constitution, and 40 of them were thrown out and dismissed. I'm sorry. How do you say he's the architect when more than half of what he wanted in the Constitution was dismissed by his fellow delegates.
What's the guy's name? One of the other delegates spoke on the floor 170 plus times on various topics. He proposed 170 different things. You never hear his name, and I just went out of my head because I'm Dean Bramage. But
we will have that for you next week.
There are people who were involved in the founding of this country that you don't hear about. The ones you hear about are the ones that they can try and find some way to say they were deists or they were atheists or they weren't really religious.
That's why we're going to do a multi-part on freedom of religion, because we're going to come up with information and links to show to you that
who the founders were.
Who the founders were, and yes, they did believe in God. And yes, they believed that children should learn about God in public school, and that God should be in every part of our lives. We will see you next week. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to say?
And in a couple of minutes, unless something's changed, Big Bear Homestead.
Big Bear Homestead.
By the way, just a quick update.
Oh, yeah, Big Bear Homestead, and then I think Deep South is on at 9.
The Big Bear Homestead, for all your trapping needs, I talked to Jason. I had some issues with raccoons. I am now up to 7 raccoons that I have removed from our property. Well, 6 here and 1 at the kids' house for trying to pilfer our eggs and chickens and things.
Oh, Rain, I absolutely love to talk to people. And I'm sorry if I came across a little angry. I'm not. I'm just impassioned about people need to actually know what's in here. Please come back at any time and debate. That I love debate. There's nothing that I love more. I am not always right, but I am not always wrong. And that's the way it should be.
Okay. So, thank you for stopping by.
As always, have a safe and blessed day.
And share your knowledge.
See you later, guys.
Big Bear Homestead.